So last week I saw the trailer for this series on Apple TV+.
We do not know why we are here. We do not know who built the silo and why we are underground. We only know the world outside our sanctuary is death.
If you boil the pact down to one rule, it's do not say you want to go outside.
I don't care about order. What about finding out the truth?
Well, that looks like about 100 other things I like, including the 100, so why not? Episode 1. So episode 1 starts with David Oyelowo, the sheriff, getting ready in this really dark, lifeless apartment and kind of reciting this ominous stuff about life in this world to the sound of ominous music as he makes his way to the sheriff's office, and we get a great view of the different levels of the silo. Nice actor. Don't really remember him from any role in particular, but he's one of those always competent guys you keep seeing every once in a while. You know, like Stanley Tucci, William Fichtner, Melanie Linsky, although from now on for me she's gonna be Shauna from Yellow Jackets. Is that actor you know him, but you can't remember where from. Anyway, he gets to the police station, locks himself in a cell, throws out the keys and calls his deputy to say,
I want to go out.
And this is all done in this really great, moody, heavy tone. He lays on the bed and thinks of Karen from the office before he closes his eyes, and we go through these really beautiful opening credits. We then go to a completely different version of the sheriff's apartment with sunshine, pictures, and a happy couple finding out they are eligible for trying to have a child. In the cafeteria, some lady approaches them about
fertility counseling,
and the sheriff is quick to dismiss her.
What I'd really be interested in is you leaving us alone.
Damn. They go to the doctor to have Karen's birth control removed, and in the office, her boss scolds her for posting an article about recovering erased files. She then questions the powers that be to the sheriff, who is quick to dismiss her too. More than half their pregnancy opportunity time has passed and Karen's still not pregnant, and back in the cafeteria, the sheriff, deputy cop, and the mayor discuss how it has been some time since someone has cleaned the camera lens outside. Gloria then approaches Karen again and shares her concerns about the stories they are told about the surface and the truth about the silo, and how they don't want people who question stuff having children. Karen then tells the sheriff about Gloria, but he just dismisses her again, and on Freedom Day she goes on a house call at George's. George then tells her how he kept putting in repair requests hoping she would show up and help him recover the files in this old hard drive that doesn't show up in any records on IT. Karen then agrees to help him as the mayor gives a Freedom Day speech to the people of the silo, and look, sci-fi has always been about discussing real-world issues through allegory and metaphors and shit, and something we see quite often is how contradictory these utopic and dystopic societies are in these stories. But this series really pushes it. You know, this woman is giving this speech to all these people literally locked up inside this facility who don't know what's out there, don't even know how they came to be here in the first place, and aren't allowed to even wonder about any of it. And she's doing it on Freedom Day, on a celebration that's all about how free everyone is. And it's like, what? Finesse, people. A little subtlety goes a long way. Look, it is one thing to portray contradiction and blind obedience, but it has to make sense. This is borderline stupid. Karen and George manage to crack the hard drive and find a blueprint of the silo before she gets scared and leaves. But this revelation sends her in a spiral of suspicion that has her paying a visit to Gloria and returning to George's home. They scan the hard drive until... and this new revelation sends her over the edge to the point where she removes her birth control with a kitchen knife, and I love the symbolism with the apple, and has the sheriff rushing towards the doctor only to come back to find her raving on the cafeteria about how everything is fake and they are all being lied to. And then she finally says, I want to go out! And I gotta tell you, I felt like Allison's descent into madness happened a little too quickly, even though they made the little montage and all. But the dialogue was so well written and everything was so well acted that it didn't hurt the storytelling at all for me. It was great. You know, typically comedic actors have this thing that they absolutely kill it when they do drama. This was true for Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness, Adam Sandler's recent endeavors, and even more recently Adam Scott in The Great Severance. Rashida Jones is no different here. The woman is amazing. We then learn why this is seen as such a tragedy. Once you say you want to go out, you go out. You are sent out to clean the camera. It's like a death penalty. The mayor and the deputy then try to come up with a solution for exonerating Allison, but the sheriff, who still would rather dismiss his wife as insane than to question the status quo, insists there's nothing they can do for her now. Gloria and George are also arrested as they make preparations for Allison's execution, and she and Wholesome have this great scene where she explains her reasons for doing what she did. She then tells him she thinks people clean the camera in the hopes that people on the inside would see how the outside is really like, which really doesn't make much sense if you think about it. It would make sense for the first one sent out, but not for anyone who came after. Because who came after the first person knows that if you clean the camera, nothing changes on the image. So she tells him that if she's right, she's gonna clean the camera. If not, she'll just wave goodbye. We then go to the really emotional execution scene, with the sheriff carrying out his wife's execution, as we find out the words he uttered in the opening scene are the very last words someone sentenced to death hears in this world. And if that's not the creepiest way of opening your story, I don't know what is.
Have you any last words?
I love you.
Fuck me, brother. You know, when I saw this was sci-fi, I was expecting something a little more sci-fi, something more focused on the world and its rules and all. Instead, they gave us some simple basic rules and anchored the whole thing on a woman going over the edge because people kept her from having a family. And that, my fellow watchers, is something that if done right, it's absolutely foolproof. You will win the audience over. Allison is then sent out, and the fact that we go through the whole process of her emerging outside, looking around, coming back, cleaning the camera, and then slowly stumbling and finally collapsing just makes everything so much worse. It's this really long sequence where everybody, including her husband, is watching, and the whole thing is this great roller coaster of emotions that had me dead silent as I watched it, trying to guess what would happen next, as I really felt for Holston. And you know what? We still don't know what really happened. She did come back to clean the lands, and she ended up dying apparently. So what did she see? And what really happened to her? So the episode ends when this cross between Adam Driver and Ilan Rubin brings news to the sheriff that George died and some engineer says it was murder. Episode 2. Episode 2 starts with Holston being prepped to clean, with the mayor and the deputy carrying out his execution just as he did with Allison years ago. The inner door is open, he starts the climb, people are waiting, including Rebecca Ferguson. The outer door is open and we go to the opening credits. Last episode I was surprised to see Rashida Jones being killed off right on the beginning of the story. But hey, it sets the premise, and it's really well set up. But then I figured we wouldn't see Holston walking outside maybe until at least half or even the end of the season. If that. But then the opening credits end and Holston is outside. Everybody sees what they are used to seeing in the silo, but now we see that Holston sees what Allison saw on the video. And this is all so unexpected. Not only for the fact that he sees what was on the video, but also because we actually get to see it through his eyes. He comes back, cleans the lens, but just as Allison did years before, slowly stumbles and ultimately collapses. And we see every second of it, at least up until he apparently collapses. And it's really interesting to see how the two scenes are alike, but Holston shows us a lot more without really showing us much of anything. Did they really die? What did Holston see in the end? Why did they die even though the outside's apparently normal? And if it's not, why would they see it as such? Are they overly sensitive to natural sunlight just like the Martians and the Belters on The Expanse because they were born and raised on a bunker? Or could it be something on the air composition outside? Hell, it could even be that they're running out of oxygen inside the suit and this is done purposely so they pass out and the camera takes a picture and overlaps all the images so the bodies keep piling up outside. What really strikes me the most about Allison and Holston's whole ordeal is that we never see them actually die. We only see what the people of the silo see, and once they collapse, that's it. So anything could be happening here. Rebecca Ferguson is pissed and calls Holston a
fucking liar!
In the aftermath of Holston's death, this woman tells Marnes about
People lining up at recycling, trying to get their hands on pipes.
and I don't really know what that means yet. Maybe to use them as weapons, I guess? Marnes then lies to the mayor about Holston's choice for the next sheriff, and she mentions again the destroying of the records by the rebels. And this whole story about the destruction of the records just doesn't make much sense to me. You have this faction in power inside the silo, then this other faction stages a coup that ultimately fails, but only manages to destroy every single piece of recorded history, and then whoever was in power before is still in power? It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense for at least two reasons. One, wouldn't it make more sense for the rebels to take power and then erase and rewrite history? And what kept the faction that remains in power from just writing the records again after this happened? Of course a lot of information would be lost, but it wouldn't be definitive like it is in this world. Just like the thing on Freedom Day, the lie behind the obvious strategy to keep people in line is just a little too fucking obvious here. The way you're doing this is just too fucking on the nose that things don't add up. So this is a problem on the lore of the series. But number two is a problem on the logic of the world. And not their world. Every world. So number one, it doesn't make any sense on the story, and number two, that's not how history works. You don't erase everything in hard drives, and it's like everybody forgets everything. Before writing, history was passed down by word of mouth. Older people would tell new generations about what happened before their times. This new generation then would pass them on to newer generations, and so on. There's no such thing as history being absolutely erased, and yet they talk about this event as if people's brains were erased just as the hard drives were. We then see Judicial for the first time, and I'm not sure where they sit on the hierarchy of the silo because even the mayor seems to be subject to them, and we get some exposition on Rebecca Ferguson where she says she's sure George didn't kill himself because he wanted to show her something. She then tells the story of how she came to know Holston. When George died, she went to speak to Ilan Driver? Adam Rubin? We then get the scene from the end of the last episode with the sheriff coming to speak to her. She makes her case on why she thinks George didn't kill himself, and it's really interesting to see Holston as the sheriff instead of the loving husband he was last episode. Also, this is a really interesting choice for what appears to be our main character. She's short-tempered, seems to be a really unstable person, and is jittery and looks extremely nervous throughout her entire sequence with Holston. He questions her about her relationship with George, but she withholds information as she doesn't quite trust him yet. She then shows him what George left her and takes Wholesome to this secret area with a gigantic digging machine she believes is what dug the silo. She then opens a box of relics George had, and among them is a goddamn camera that she carelessly dismisses because she doesn't know what it is for. And I was like, fuck, that's good suspense. What's in the goddamn camera? They then find the hard drive and Allison's notes, but Wholesome tries to dismiss Rebecca just like he did to Allison. But Rebecca's no sweet Rashida Jones and spits some hard truths on Wholesome's face, who then tells her the hell he has been living in for the past 2 years. She finishes telling her story, saying she never spoke to Wholesome again. And I gotta tell you, this series is one twist after the other. At first I was expecting a hard sci-fi, and instead we got this great emotional drama so far. Then the main character was Allison, then it was Wholesome, now it's Juliet, and then I thought we would get the story of how she worked with him up until when Wholesome went outside. But then they quickly tell us that she only spoke to the man once. Where is this going, goddammit? Marge then reveals to the mayor who Wholesome wanted to be his successor, and we get this really sweet moment between Juliet and George that shows us a much more vulnerable side of her. He tells her he needs rope to look for a door somewhere, and the episode ends with Juliet using George's rope to descend into the wet darkness under the colossal machine. And this investigation we had this episode had me really excited about what's coming next. The suspense and the building up of tension has been awesome up until this point. How Wholesome's death showed us a little more than Allison's, but just enough to raise 100 more questions. The way they follow George's clues, the way Juliet casually dismissed the camera, the fact that she never spoke to Wholesome again. And now the episode ending with the woman literally going into the unknown. Episode 3. Episode 3 starts with Juliet chickening out and getting hammered as the mayor and the deputy go look for this Juliet Nichols Wholesome appointed to succeed him. Juliet then rushes to the generator room because
My fix is failing.
ooh, slow down people, let's not overcomplicate this science shit. She punches Cooper in the face because, you know, she's crazy, and gets scolded by her boss for being an irresponsible mess. The mayor and the deputy then pay a visit to Tim Robbins to look for support in appointing Juliet as the new sheriff, but he opposes it, calling her a thief and saying Paul Billings is the obvious choice because of his superior numbers, and warns them that every minute they spend on this nonsense brings the silo closer to the brink of disaster because people don't feel safe anymore. They then arrive at the silo's nursery, and before they go in, a crowd gathers to say hi to the mayor like she's some sort of fairy tale ruler beloved by all her subjects. And this is kind of weird because something we usually have in these type of sci-fi authoritarian societies is class struggle, or at least some animosity between the people and their rulers. But here we seem to have none of it, even though they have already mentioned that there are people up top, in the middle, and on the bottom. And sure, it doesn't always have to be a major part in your story, but to never have it even mentioned is kinda weird. They then pay a visit to Jorah, Juliet's father, who neglected his 13-year-old daughter after she went down to mechanical, and are pressured by Judicial, who wants to push Paul Billings as a new sheriff. They finally arrive at the generator room just as
The fix is failing again!
Jeez, the sci-fi lingo is really getting out of hand, people, and then the lamest shit ever happens.
I've tried switching.
I need to listen.
I hate this shit.
The generator? She's not well.
It's it. It's fucking it. It's a fucking machine. It's the generator. Stop calling it she, goddammit. Anyway, the mayor asks her to be the new sheriff and she goes like,
No, I don't want it.
The mayor then hands Juliet Wholesome's star and leaves. Juliet discusses the situation with her friends, and not Adam Driver finds something on the back of Wholesome's badge which makes Nichols change her mind and impose the condition that she will only accept the job if she can fix the generator. And for that, they'll need to
Shut it down.
The pair resists but eventually complies. People make preparations for the power outage as, well, I don't know the name of this chick. There's too many people. Anyway, she explains how the generator works and what they'll have to do and how much time they'll have to do it. The power then goes out and whoopsies.
Nobody knows that they saw it, but they did.
And again, just like with the camera, I love how nonchalantly they throw this stuff out there. Mayor Johns and Deputy Marnes bond as shit starts to hit the fan once the pressure starts building up much faster than expected. The boss then tells them they'll have to open the valve, but Juliet has a solution for their problem.
What are you doing?
It's the only way to cool it down!
Well, yeah, it's also obvious. Aren't you people all supposed to be engineers and mechanics down there? If you have a goddamn fire hose at your disposal and somewhere you know you can aim it to cool the machine down and reduce the pressure, then why the fuck didn't you do this from the start? Shit, you don't even have to aim it at the door, just fill the entire fucking chamber with water for God's sake. Also, pretty sure the steam would cook this woman alive. Anyway, she buys them more time as we go to not Elon Rubin and another deputy patrolling the pitch black silo, and I kept expecting for something to happen to them.
Help! Somebody help!
Ooh, it's an ambush, but nothing ever did. And first of all, what was the point of the scene? And second, again, this just seems so unreal. Even absurd. You have 10,000 human beings
10,000 people.
already subjected to the extreme scenario of being locked up in a silo forever, divided by class, in an authoritarian regime under which people can't even talk about certain topics. Then you shut down their life support for a night and leave everyone in the dark, uncertain if the power will even be turned back on again, and you don't get the tiniest bit of civil unrest. Not even one brawl, one mugging, one murder. Brother, not even the most surreal, calmy, wet dream ever. Look, the mystery and the drama are on point, and I'm really connected to the story and the characters. But the sci-fi aspect of it is really lacking at this point. I don't really get how this society works, and this doesn't need to be Star Trek, but a little more caring to the scientific side would be greatly appreciated. They then manage to fix the generator. Juliet says goodbye and gives Martha George's camera, hoping she'll find out how it works. And we finally get to see what's on the back of Holston's star. What is it? What is it? What? 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 The episode then ends with the mayor suffering some kind of bloody seizure, and this is interesting because earlier in the episode I noticed this poster hanging on the wall of the generator's control room. Is this syndrome what the mayor has?